How's it going, everyone? In this video, we are going to talk about projections, specifically within my fractal model, and how they are used. They are mechanical targets, and I personally use them as a confluence to existing liquidity targets. Let's get into the PDF. So the first thing you're going to have to do is grab a Fibonacci tool and then apply these settings. So we'll want to mark out a 1, 0, -1, -2, -2.5, -4, and -4.5. You can always add levels that you find work for you. These are just the ones that I use. So how do we actually mark out a projection? So it's always going to be within candle 2 at the reversal point. So here you can see we have the change in the state of delivery, or the change in the state of delivery here in the bearish scenario. And I'm going to find the manipulation leg. So once we have a change in the state of delivery, I'm going to look for that low, and then I'm going to find the high that made that low, that whole manipulation leg, and I'm going to go ahead and mark that out. From there, I'm going to draw my projection. I'm going to anchor it to the low and then draw it to the high that made that low. By doing that, I'll be able to draw out a projection that then gives me targets for this move based off the manipulation leg. So by removing that manipulation leg and cleaning it up, you can see we are just measuring that high that made that low for a bullish scenario, or the low that made that high in the bearish scenario. This is going to provide targets for this move higher. Now with a average or normal size manipulation leg, I'm generally looking for price to reach to the -2 or -2.5, and if price is going to expand, the -4 to -4.5. So I will look for liquidity targets in that area to be paired with, and I'm going to use these projections as a confluence. Now, let's say we have a large manipulation leg. So here you can see this opposing run, or the change in the state of delivery, is very large. When I have a large manipulation leg, I'm not looking for price to reach for that -2 to -2.5. That is just too much range. I'm then going to use the -1 as my target. And I personally love to use this on the hourly chart for the daily range. So now that you understand how to mark out these projections, where they go, let's go into TradingView and go over a few examples of this so you can actually understand what is going on. So here we are with our first example, and if you take a look, we have Bitcoin on the 4-hour chart paired with the weekly chart looking at the fractal model. So we have a candle 2 closure as price has swept out its previous week's low and closed back inside. We have a change in the state of delivery. So as we discussed in the PDF, what are we going to look for? We're going to find the low, we're going to find the high that made that low, and that is our manipulation leg. We're then going to take our Fibonacci retracement tool, anchor from the low, drag it to the high that made the low, and with those settings that we talked about in the PDF, we will project out targets for this move. So cleaning up the chart a little, you may also notice how these projections also align with liquidity targets. We have equal highs sitting here, as well as a previous high sitting here. So in this next candle, this next week, we could be looking for price to trade into those liquidity targets using the projections as a confluence. And there you can see we hit our first projection target as well as liquidity point. And if we get a nice closure on this next week's candle, then we can look for the fourth candle in the swing to trade higher as well. And you can see with that good closure, we're looking for a shallow wick on this weekly candle to finish trading into the highs. And there you can see we have hit our targets as well as our projections. So like I said in the PDF, I prefer to use projections as a confluence to a target, but you can also use them alone, as if you do not have liquidity in a certain area, you can use those projections as a target. Here we are in our next example, and we are on gold on the hourly chart. Now if you notice, we have Thursday forming a nice candle 2 closure with a large wick, and we have a change in the state of delivery. So if we're going to project out targets, where are we going to do that? Well, it's always going to be in candle 2 at the reversal. We have a change in the state of delivery, we'll find the low, we'll find the series of candles that made that low, or the swing high that made that low, mark that out. Then we'll grab our Fibonacci retracement, anchor to the low, go to that swing high, and then now we have projections for this move. Now you notice how the -2 to -2.5 is also lining up with this previous day's high, as well as the liquidity to the left. So that is a good confluence to see. We want to see that. So let's see how this plays out. And there you can see, we go ahead and hit that target and we go right through it. So then we could also be looking for price to trade to the -4 to -4.5. Let's see what happens. There we go. We get a nice retracement, open low, high close, and we trade to that max target. So just to review, when we have that candle 2 closure or a reversal or a swing point, look for a change in the state of delivery, find the manipulation leg, mark out the manipulation leg, and then look for targets that align with that. Or if you are lacking targets, projections make a great tool for trading at all-time highs or areas where you do not have any liquidity resting. So here we are with our next example. We are on YM on the 5-minute chart. And if you're taking a look, we do have a reversal here, right? It's not very clean. And if you look, the range is not very large. So I have pretty low expectations for this move. But what do we notice about this manipulation leg? We have a change in the state of delivery. So finding the high, finding the low that made that high, that's quite the manipulation leg. So if we go ahead and mark that out, and then clean up the chart, you can see that we have quite a projection. It's not very reasonable for late into this New York session to anticipate YM to just go 500 to 600 points. So this is an example of when we have a large manipulation leg, I can use that -1 standard deviation as a target. So it would be nice to look back to the left and see if this lines up with anything. And here you can see we do have a low that lines up with that -1 standard deviation. Let's see how this works out. And you can see that is where we go and hit. We take out that low, we hit our -1 standard deviation, and then we form a reversal back into the range. So this is an example of when I have a large manipulation leg, I'm not really looking for price to go to the -2, -2.5, or the -4. I'm going to look and lower my expectations and look for that -1 standard deviation. So here we are with our next example, and you can see we have formed a candle 2 closure, we have a change in the state of delivery, and we have failure swings on the left. But what do we notice about this manipulation leg? It is quite large. We mark out the low, we find the high that made that low, and we look at the range. Our range or our target is right here, and our manipulation leg is almost half of that. That's quite a large manipulation leg, so marking out our projections. What would we want to do here? We'd want to focus on targeting that -1 standard deviation instead of looking for price to expand all the way to the -4, because that's just an absurd move. So coming back in, let's see what happens here. You can see we have a nice open low, high close, and we trade right through the -1. Now, if we're not going to reverse off this high, that's when we can look for price to expand further to our next targets. You can see there we get an expansion into that -2 to -2.5. Now let's see how this daily candle closes. So now we have a candle 2 closure. We have yet to form a change in the state of delivery, so we need to wait for that. And now that we have that change in the state of delivery, what can we look for? Well, we can go ahead and mark out the manipulation leg. So from this high to the low that made that high. And then I can go ahead and mark that out with my projections. Now what I can also do is if I use my indicator, I can just go into the settings here and I will turn on the projections. And this will allow me to do the exact same thing without having to mark them up. You can see we get our projections on the screen. What do we notice about this manipulation leg? It is quite large. This is where, am I really expecting this current daily range to go expand all the way down here? Probably not. So this is where I can look for price to expand to the -1 within this current daily range. Let's see how this works out. There we hit our -1. Now if we're going to get a continuation to these lows, we have all these failure swings. That lines up with the -2 to -2.5. So then that gives me a confluence to the target for this downside move. And you can see, there we go and run out these lows, as well as hit all of these standard deviation projection targets. So here we are in our last and final example, and let's take a look at a few scenarios. So what do we notice about this reversal right here? If we take a look at the range, it is quite a large manipulation leg. So what would I want to be targeting in this scenario? Well, the -1, right? And so we hit our -1, and we get a consolidation, and we're starting to form a little reversal off of that. Now let's play through this and see what happens and how projections can add some confluence. So here we get a reversal. Do we get the closure? We do. So taking a look at this, what do we notice? We have our -2 to -2.5 just before that low. Now when this occurs, I like to take my profit at that liquidity point prior to the final target, because a lot of times price will take out this low, and then if it's consolidating, go back into the range. So I'll go ahead and see how does this work out. We go and hit that target, we open up a new candle, and we go and hit that final target. But that's just a scenario where most of the time I'm going to take my profit here and not be greedy to hold for an extra few points and give up the entire move. Now let's see if we form a reversal in the other direction. We do. And what do we notice about these targets, right? The -1 aligns with some equal highs here, and the -2 to -2.5 lines up with these failure swing highs here. Now, if price is going to remain in a consolidation, this is where I'm going to want to actually pay attention to this -1 target because it's the liquidity point internal to this range. But let's see how this works out. So we go and we do not reverse off this high. So I could be looking for price to trade higher into the highs. And this is where we actually are currently. So we'll see if this high eventually does get taken out, but that is what I would be looking for. The projections are a confluence to this target here. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. If it does make sense to you, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. But with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.